If there's one thing about Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, is that he's definitely going to be with a new person every season, and that carried over. Hey there, Cinephiles. Today I'm reviewing the first season of Daredevil Born Again. Yes, the entire season. I was lucky enough to get a press screener for the entire show, and well, I'm glad I get to do this review. Especially because I love the original series. The first 3 seasons, yes, even the second season, which many people didn't like, I really enjoyed. And that 3rd season alone is probably one of my favorite seasons of television ever. Granted, I don't really watch that much television, so there's not that much to compare it to, but I still have such an affinity for the show, and I was cautiously optimistic going into the show due to the fact that they brought on Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock again, along with Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, and so many other actors in this. And now with this revival after 7 years of its cancellation right after its best season, this is a mixed bag that leans positive. With Daredevil being resurrected in the Disney Plus era, it's not as bad as many feared it would be, but it's not as great as the show used to be either. The way Daredevil Born Again works is basically as a rebootquel, a continuation of what came before it, but also just kind of resetting the entire board at the same time. There's a slew of new characters, and yet its history is still very important to what is happening now and what will happen for seasons to come. And I'm not trying to give away too much of what happens in the show, but basically overall the show is just kind of 50-50 good and 50-50 bad, especially dealing with its past, present, and future. But let me get into the positives first. Charlie Cox as Daredevil, I mean, come on. He is fantastic. He hasn't lost a step, and I am so glad he is back. Both as Matt Murdock and Daredevil, he is just great. When he's acting as this lawyer by day, it's wonderful, and I was just so along the ride. And when he's donning the mask as Daredevil, as the titular hero, it's mostly great to see. Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin is still commanding on the screen, and I do really like the ideas of where he's going as a character, especially in this season for the most part. All the stuff with him trying to be mayor, I found pretty good. Also, the new wrench in his relationship with Vanessa, I found enjoyable for what it was. Overall, too, as a show, their willingness to try new things, I admire. And especially one storyline that has cops who have the Punisher emblem on them. This is very reflective of real life stuff, and it's kind of awesome to see the show grapple that. Not necessarily speaking on the quality of how it grapples it in the show, but I do think it's a very interesting thing to go down, especially as a Disney Plus show. And honestly, I'm kind of excited to see the chatter that comes from it. Also, there's a few scenes that depict Daredevil's sense of, well, sensing things around him that I found to be actually really cool. My only issue is they don't necessarily showcase it that way often. It's very few and far in between, but nevertheless, it's a really cool thing that I do wish they just implemented more. Now getting into the missteps for me. Starting with how they get into these new slew of characters, it's just not my favorite in how they handle it. And you see it in the first episode. I felt like it was afraid to go into this new route with these new characters and locations and just this new world essentially, without giving a proper send-off to what it was letting go of. And because of that, you felt that struggle, and it's unsatisfying. Ultimately, it's a muddled transition, and even though it does get better, it's still not anything that is as great as what came before, so it's hard to fully buy into it. Another thing I wasn't a huge fan of were the B-roll and transition shots. At first, it's a small thing, but then it just becomes degrading because they don't look great. It looks like stock footage or even AI shots, and it just gets annoying after a while because it starts to feel so formulaic. Also, anything that the character BB shoots in this and they show, I like the idea of including this in this, but it's just the execution, and I'm just not really a fan of. Also, anything Muse related, that was bad to me. Like, that was just genuinely bad, and how it was included in the show and where it was, it just sticks out like a sore thumb to everything else to me. But probably my biggest gripe with Daredevil Born Again is how much it feels like a setup season. This is supposed to be its big comeback, and now it just feels like, well, hopefully it's not too long for the next season. When in reality, this should have been a pretty satisfying conclusion to at least its own storylines in it, with teasing things to come, as opposed to just feeling like the first half of a season. I don't know, once I finished it, it just wasn't fulfilling, even though I guess I am looking forward to the next season. But with that being said, a majority of the show does garner mixed reactions from me. Starting with anything that dealt with White Tiger, I liked what they included for him, but it just felt like there should have been more of it. With raising the focus on him and his connection to the entire show, I think that would have benefited it a lot more. And don't get me wrong, what comes from this storyline does impact the entire season. It just feels like they were building it up to be bigger and better than it actually ended up being. And maybe I'll look back and appreciate it more, but as of right now, I needed more in the moment. A similar thing can be said about all of the Punisher stuff. There was some of it in here, and a lot of it is very interesting, but it doesn't sink its teeth into it enough for me. It needed to grapple with all that stuff a lot more because it could have truly been interesting. Look, overall, once again, this is a mixed bag of a show that I lean positive towards. I do like a lot of the things in here, but there are a lot of things that just felt underdeveloped and just like it needed more love and attention given to it. If you just cut out a few things from here and you let it breathe a bit more and you had a more proper transition into this whole season, I think I would have loved it. Because again, there are many wonderful ideas at work here, just a lot of them don't necessarily work. And I do think it's a good enough show to be entertaining for many and for many other people to feel like Daredevil is back. But I do think this is going to garner a pretty okay reaction overall. One that hopefully pushes the people who make this show now to try and improve upon it for the second season of this. Because I do think it lays interesting enough groundwork to really, become a great show. It's just right now, it's pretty okay. As far as Disney Plus shows go for Marvel, this is pretty good, but comparatively to its predecessor, it's not quite there. At least not yet. I do see hope for it in the future. But alright, those are my thoughts on Daredevil Born Again. Be sure to let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. I know many people aren't going to finish the season until April 15th. I think that's when the final episode comes out. But on a weekly basis, be sure to let me know what you think of the show as it comes out down in the comments below. But alright, as always, thank you guys for watching, liking, and subscribing. Be sure to stay tuned for more Yeti Films content, and I'll watch you later.